You're listening to the Anxiety Reset Podcast. I'm your host, Georgie Collinson, anxiety mindset coach, gut health expert, and nutritionist. And this is where I share cutting-edge ideas and deep discussions to help you find more freedom, calm, and control in your life. Welcome to the show, everyone. In this episode, we've got a special one lined up. We're going to be going back through the archives. This is episode 150. Can you believe it? My mind is blown. And I know some people approach the show and see all the episodes and they're like, where do I even start? So I wanted to give you a little checkpoint here where we can revisit the very first episode of the Anxiety Reset podcast. It might be interesting to listen back and see if you think I sound a bit different from the first episode to now. I've certainly had more practice as a podcast host, but actually listening back, I don't think I sound much different. I don't know. You let me know. But we're going to go back to that episode because it's actually one of the most popular, most downloaded episodes of the podcast ever. And I wanted to make it easier for people to find that information. It's worth re-listening to. In that episode, we go through the basic fundamentals of the anxiety reset method, everything you need to know about managing anxiety, from the thoughts you think to the health of your gut, your hormones, the food you eat, the way you live your life, and your beliefs, and much, much more. So our mind learns through repetition. So the more you can revisit things like this, the more that information is going to sink in. So I hope you enjoy revisiting episode 1 of the podcast, Anxiety is Not Who You Are. Okay, let's go to the show. Anxiety is not who you are. You are so much more than anxiety. You can feel anxiety sometimes, but one of the first steps that I talk people through is actually trying to remove this sense of identification with the anxiety, like it's yours and it's part of who you are. In fact, this makes a lot more sense if you consider that we actually are living in what I call an anxiogenic environment. That's a real word. It means anxiety inducing. And I'll give you a few examples of what I mean, and it'll become pretty clear to you too that this is about so much more than just you and your personality. So consider our work culture. For example, we are working longer hours than ever before. We have more expectation on what we can achieve and the productivity that is expected of us in a day than ever before. For a lot of us, our workday is starting well before we actually arrive in the office or wherever your workplace may be. Often we may be checking emails on the commute to work. We may be answering emails at 3 a.m, depending on your work. And I really hope that if you're in a situation like that, you might try to see how you might be able to exercise some better boundaries in your life. But certainly there is a culture here of overwork and way, way, way too much pressure. And of course, that is going to lead us to a sense of anxiety. Of course, we also have financial pressures, and these seem to be bigger and greater than ever before. We have our readily available world news, which honestly, we didn't used to know a whole lot about what was going on the other side of the world, 50, 100 years ago. But now we hear it immediately. We see it. We see video images caught on smartphones by people, in these affected areas, wherever there might be a disaster or a big news story. And we almost feel like we are in it. We're experiencing all of those moments of massive pain and destruction. And it's very, very close to home in the sense of how much we feel it. We feel it almost as though it is happening in our backyard. However, often these things are happening on the other side of the world, and there's not a lot that we can directly do to stop, to help, to prevent these incidents that can happen, that we hear about in the world news. And I honestly do talk to my clients about this, about just also giving yourself some boundaries around the news, because it's very, very easy to develop a really negative perspective on the world when you are exposed to this stuff to the level that we can be. We can have apps on our phones alerting us to the latest news story. We can have, obviously, the television. There's so many different ways, though, that we're exposed to this. And I honestly don't believe that it is healthy. It's not good for our minds. And it creates anxiety. It creates a sense of the world is a bad place. Then there's time scarcity. And this is just something that we talk about as a society, as a culture. It's how many of us are saying that we are too busy all the time. There's just not enough hours in the day. I wish I could, but I've got this commitment. I've got that responsibility. A lot of us are feeling this pressure to fit so many things in our lives and tick off so many things in our to-do list with only limited time. And, things are, with technology in our current way of living, we are able to get so many things done in a day because messages are instant, phone calls are instant, we can have video conferences, we can order something online and expect it to be delivered within a day or two. This fast pace that we have developed, this momentum, is anxiety inducing, and it leaves us feeling like there's never enough time, because there is the potential that we can get so much done because we expect things instantly, but we often don't allow ourselves to go slow anymore. We often don't feel like we've done enough, and I'm sure many of you can relate to that. I certainly know I can at times, and I have to remind myself that it's okay to just get 3 really important tasks done on this day. We've got social media and advertising constantly telling us that we're not good enough. On social media, it's so easy to compare yourself, to compare your life, your real life, to the edited, Photoshop, face-tuned highlight reel of all of these other people that we might follow on Instagram or Facebook or whatever you prefer when it comes to social media. Especially if you are noticing the ads that are targeting you, a lot of them do count on you having a lower sense of self-esteem. They prey on your confidence or your lack thereof by telling you you need to have this latest eyebrow kit, because if you don't have eyebrows that look like this, then you are not worthy, you're not good enough, you're not meeting the mark. Or if you don't have this swimsuit, or if you don't have this spray tan, whatever it might be that is the company, the brand is trying to sell you, they're actually using your insecurities to sell that to you. So I think it's really empowering to become aware of that. And this is why I'm going through all of these. But you can see how that can lead to anxiety. It's eroding our self-esteem every time we are targeted by these ads, every time we see these influencers, or even it might even be your friend who's, on a beautiful holiday in Europe that's making you feel less than. I'm not doing enough. I haven't hit those milestones in my life. Maybe it's seeing engagements, weddings, babies, all of these things that reinforce that sense of we need to be ticking off those moments in our lives. And if we haven't hit that, we're failing. That is anxiety inducing. And that's not about you. And that's not about your personality and something that's inherent within you. We are so disconnected from nature. This is the next point I want to discuss, is we can have all kinds of fruit and vegetables available to us at any time of the year, even regardless of what season it is. Regardless of that, we can access things from overseas, and We honestly have lost that connection to the rhythms of nature, the cycles of nature, understanding that at certain times of year, certain foods are available, certain foods are not. Understanding, especially as women, we are so disconnected from our bodies, many of us. We don't know what's happening with our hormones. We don't understand our bodies, our menstrual cycles. We often don't trust ourselves. In fact, we are often really raised to not trust ourselves and not trust our signs of our bodies, and that we can kind of, we're taught to almost fear that we could get pregnant at any moment, and that we're vulnerable and in that way, and that our body doesn't have signs to tell us when we are fertile and when we are not. But of course we do have those signs, and that's something that you can look into and learn. We are so disconnected from community. So many of us can live our lives, especially, I can be prone to this sometimes too, as I work primarily from my laptop. I am not with a team of people every day, and that sense of community is something I have to be aware of and work on and make happen in my life. Otherwise, I can easily isolate and lose it. And a lot of us, where does community come from? I mean, it used to come from living in smaller towns, smaller communities where you knew people. And now a lot of us, the majority of us, we're living in big cities. You can go to the supermarket and use the self-serve checkout, and you do not have to interact with another human being if you do not want to. Instead of catch-ups with friends, we send each other memes. It is really easy to lose this sense of community in your life, and we are tribal beings. It makes us feel so good and so safe and secure if we know that we have a group, if we know that we are being looked out for, we are being protected, we've got a fallback. And so many of us don't feel that. And that is so anxiety inducing, because it's like your brain has to protect you because you're on your own. Who's going to look after me if I'm sick? Who's going to look after me if I can't do it? If I can't show up to work? And it's a complete survival mechanism that we end up going into to protect ourselves when we feel isolated. We don't have a group. We don't have a fallback. And so this is where community is so, so important. And we'll be discussing that one more through the podcast as well. So many of us are chasing these material values, and it's not your fault per se. It is reinforced by the society we live in. We are sold this lie that if you want to be happy, buy the things, get the things, get those new sneakers, get that jewelry, buy that car, have that house, have these clothes. When you have those things, you'll automatically be happy. And it can be beyond just things. It can be the body. It can be, if you lose that weight, then you'll be happy. And of course, what we all discover if we go down that road, and many of us have, in fact, I think it's pretty impossible to avoid it, you discover that there's an emptiness in the fulfillment that comes from these things. We don't actually feel any of our real needs are met. Money, material goods, they cannot bring us happiness, true and lasting happiness. And it's really great to start to become aware of whether you might be chasing those material things and buying into that lie that we are told, that happiness lies in the things, because then you can start to step back a little bit. It doesn't mean never buying nice things and living in a terrible condition, but it simply means reducing the importance of these things and knowing that your worth doesn't actually lie in how much money you have and what clothes you wear. Your worth is so much bigger than that. And that is where happiness comes from. That is where a sense of peace comes from. But when we're on that hamster wheel, chasing these things, not really living a deeper truth to ourselves, that is anxiety inducing. Absolutely. And finally, a lot of us have relationship stresses. And this is not just romantic relationships. This can be family. This can be parental, both being a parent and looking after or managing your own parents. And a lot of us have these. There's really no one gets to have the perfect family, the perfect friendship group. We're all messy humans bringing our experiences and our wounds and our traumas together and really kind of bumping up against one another. So we're all going to trigger one another at some point and have difficulties and challenges arrive in our relationships. And that is actually a good thing because it helps us to grow. We learn the most about ourselves through our relationships to others. However, does it cause anxiety? Absolutely. When you cut a connection with someone or you feel a break in a supportive, trusting connection that you used to be able to feel safe around, that used to make you feel like you were protected, you are going to feel anxiety because it's like being kicked out of the tribe. It's like feeling this sense of being alone and not safe anymore. And finally, a big one that is not about you, this is not built into your personality, is traumatic events. And they are so much more common than you might realize. If anything traumatic has happened to you, when I say that word, if you feel that it was traumatic, then it was. And I want to validate that for you. And I really, really encourage you to seek the right support if you have not done so yet. Really seek some help for managing that trauma because you deserve it. And it was not your fault, whatever happened. Now, understanding too that trauma can be sexual, it can be physical abuse, but it can also be car accidents. It can be physical injuries, health crises. There are so many different ways that traumatic events show up in our lives that we don't always acknowledge and give that sort of support and importance to. So I just want to acknowledge those as well. Now, as I go through all of these points, I've covered 10 of them. I want you to think about which ones apply to you. Certainly most of them will. But I want you to start to see that it's no wonder you're anxious. You have every right to be, given what you've been through. And I just really want to validate that for you, that there's nothing wrong with you. Anyone living in this environment that I've just described is vulnerable to anxiety. But this is not how we want to be, and we don't have to be this way. Okay, so it's kind of like we're out there in the battlefield and there's bullets raining down on us, and it can be really tough in life sometimes. Lots of challenges come up. However, we can put that battle armor on. We can put on our bulletproof vest. And that is what the anxiety reset method is all about. That's what I teach. So this is about building your resilience to anxiety because some of us are more vulnerable than others. And a classic example would be if you've had a terrible night's sleep or you're not a good sleeper in general, your brain is primed for anxiety. You are setting yourself up for a sensitive nervous system where you will, jump at the slamming of a door or the sound on the roof when you don't get a good night's sleep. So sleep is one of the fundamental aspects of this resilience shield. This is one way you can build your anxiety resilience. And certainly throughout the podcast, we will be talking more deeply about sleep and what you can do to maximize your sleep. A big one for me is talking about gut health. Absolutely. And I really love this opportunity to explain to you guys at length how healing your gut, looking after your gut health is not the only factor with anxiety. It is one key pillar. It is one portion of that bulletproof vest, that shield, that resilience shield that you can build for yourself to reduce the reactivity of your nervous system, to help reset your anxious mind. So gut health is extremely important, and it's a massive passion of mine. It's something that definitely has an impact on anxiety, and we're getting more and more research about this every few months. Really, there's a new trial, there's more information about what certain strains of bacteria in our gut, or the microbiome actually, because it's more than just bacteria. It includes viruses, protozoa, fungi, and yeasts as well. So all of these have an impact on how healthy our gut is, how much we produce inflammation in our body from our gut, and also how well we regulate those chemicals in our brain. So you may have been told at some point that you have a chemical imbalance in your brain, but in fact, that is like just trimming the leaves of a weed instead of pulling it out from the root. The chemical imbalance that can happen in the brain, for sure. When we're anxious, we don't have enough of this chemical called GABA, which stands for gamma-aminobutyric acid. You don't have to remember that. Serotonin can often be involved too, and dopamine as well. These are pretty much our key players when it comes to the brain chemicals that impact mood, anxiety, and depression. But our gut health is a big factor in what these chemicals in our brain are doing. So when we sort of just have an approach where we're just looking at how can we change those chemicals in our brain as though that's the main issue, it's really just sweeping a bigger issue under the rug. And we can look at those root causes. We can pull that weed out from the root and start to find out why is your brain producing chemicals in a way that is not more stable. And of course, going back to what I explained about this anxiogenic environment that we live in, a lot of us are exposed to traumas. And we do know that traumas change the brain. But that doesn't mean we cannot build resilience. It doesn't mean we cannot optimize the body's ability to regulate itself, to find balance. It doesn't mean we can't support your body in resetting itself, in finding that stability. Now, I've got so much more to share with you about gut health, what you can do to look after your gut, the different ins and outs of how the gut impacts your anxiety and helps to keep your nervous system stable. But for now, I will just give you a few questions to ask yourself to help you determine whether your gut health is something that you may need to focus on, that may be a big, important part of managing anxiety for you. Because when it comes to this anxiety reset method, certain factors are more important than others, just depending on you as an individual. So you might be a great sleeper, so we don't really need to worry about sleep as much for you, but maybe other people really sleep's a big challenge. So it just depends. We're all different and we all have a different combination of areas we need to work on to build that resilience for ourselves. But when it comes to your gut, ask yourself, are you having a bowel motion every day? And if you're having one, that's great. But are you having too many? Are you having more than 3 in one day? Because some of us are too frequent and we're actually losing a lot of our nutrients when we have too many bowel motions in a day. Think about the consistency, and keep in mind, I talk about this all the time, so I've got no filter when it comes to discussing our bowel health. But it's really important that we talk about this because, and that you have a look and pay attention when you do go to the bathroom. Have you noticed that your stools are quite loose most of the time? Do you know what a normal bowel motion is? It's meant to be quite well formed in one peace, not too firm, passes easily, and you don't really have to wipe very much. Maybe one wipe is enough. That is a great bowel motion. If you are on the other end of the spectrum, it might be hard and firm, might be in pellets. These are some signs that there is something a little bit off with your gut, with your digestion. And if you are someone with anxiety, as I assume you likely are if you're listening to this, then it's quite common for the gut to be impacted simply because our nervous system and our gut are inextricably linked. So when you are anxious, the muscles of the bowel that control the movement through your intestines actually change behavior. So you might, for some of us, we get diarrhea. For other people, everything shuts down and there's no movement happening and we get constipation. You might also fall into the category of someone who has changeable bowels. So you can sometimes be one way, sometimes be the other, and it's really hard to predict. So these are just some things to start to be aware of in yourself. Do you notice that you get quite bloated on most days and you can't really work out if it's due to a food? And maybe you've tried a bit of trial and error there and you can't work out what it is. Maybe you notice that when you wake up in the morning, your stomach's nice and flat and you feel comfortable, but every evening it's bloated again. This is another sign that there's something going on with your gut health that is likely having an impact on the rest of your body and potentially your mental health too. Another thing to ask yourself is, do you get a lot of gas? Again, just reflecting and thinking about this for your own benefit. And the last thing that we generally cover, the thing that I ask all of my clients is the color. Is it a brown color, a muddy brown color, or is it quite pale? Can it be quite pale yellow? Can it be green? Some of these colors can indicate to us that there is something else going on, generally involving the liver as well. So I hope you've had a chance to think about that for yourself. And if you haven't, just take note over the next few days. Most of us don't pay attention. And the more information you can gather about your body and your health, the more power to you. The next aspect that we consider is nutrition. So nutrition has a big impact on essentially providing the building blocks for you to be able to make those chemicals in your brain that keep you feeling happy, calm, stable mood, not reactive, not irritable. So does your diet have an impact on your mental health? Can it be impacting your anxiety? Absolutely. We'll be discussing this in a lot more detail. Nutrition is such an important one. But what I want to make clear to you right now is just the importance of making sure that your gut health is in a good place before we even think about the nutrients, before we even think about taking supplements. In fact, you might be quite savvy. You might like to do your own research online, and you might have a whole lot of supplements that you take regularly. But it's possible that if your gut health isn't in a great place, you might not even be absorbing those nutrients as efficiently as you could be. So all that effort you've put in to remember to take your supplements, your pills, your powders, your capsules, or perhaps you've made a big diet shift and you're trying to eat all the right foods, it may be going to waste if your gut health is not in a great state. So just keep that in mind. It's really important to start with the gut first and then move on to nutrition. Now, hormones and whether they are in balance or not is certainly a factor to consider for anxiety, and one that doesn't always get discussed. In fact, PMS, premenstrual syndrome, tends to be dismissed as a bit of a normal part of being a woman. We are just stuck that way. We're always going to be irritable, emotional, and more prone to anxiety before our periods. Now, that doesn't have to be the case. I will let you know. PMS can be managed. It absolutely can be. And you do not have to have that anxiety spin leading up to your period. But for now, I just want you to think about is your anxiety linked to your menstrual cycle? Have you thought about that? Have you ever taken a moment to track your menstrual cycle and note what day of your period you are on? There are a lot of apps that can help you do this. And just note whether there's a correlation with your anxiety. It is so empowering when you have this knowledge, because then you can do something about it. And just for the record, the oral contraceptive pill does not fix PMS. It doesn't really solve the issue. And that's something that we can certainly discuss as well. I see so many women as well with what we call estrogen dominance, which is essentially a high levels of estrogen in the body, which is the reason why we get lots of heavy, painful periods. If it's not endometriosis, just painful periods and heavy periods typically does come back to estrogen levels in the body. And if you are one of those women that does get a lot of period pain, I would be asking yourself, I wouldn't be surprised if you also have trouble with your gut and you notice that you do skip a day here or there, or potentially you get constipated quite regularly. This is such a common link with your hormones where we see constipation and heavy painful periods, because this is how we get a backload of estrogen in the body. So it does have a big impact, and it's something that can also be managed. And particularly when it comes to clearing estrogen from the body, I will have an entire episode where we talk about hormones, but certainly consuming more of those cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, kale, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, is a wonderful way to help support your body naturally to clear some of that excess estrogen. And also being mindful of your fiber intake. For some women, it's just simply that we're not drinking enough water as well, which means that our bowels are not moving regularly. We need that hydration. Water is such an important one, guys. It's not something I would directly link to anxiety, but certainly it has so many, it is essential for life. It's essential for our body to be functioning at its best. So I'm just going to slide in a little reminder to keep on top of your water intake, and certainly to look after your hormones. If you're drinking your water out of a plastic water bottle, that needs to stop. This is like one of my biggest passions. If I can stop any of you women who are listening to this podcast from drinking your water out of a plastic bottle, then I will sleep like a baby. So I just want to remind you that it's really important that we reduce our exposure to plastics in general for our hormone health, and start to consider alternatives, things like glass water bottles, things like BPA-free generally isn't even good enough. So looking at glass or stainless steel is your best option there. Now, another really important pillar of building your anxiety resilience is actually fostering and nurturing a connection with nature. Just as we spoke about before, we are so cut off from nature in our daily lives, and the therapeutic effect of simply being in nature, being in a green space, is so, so powerful. Think how much we spend our days just inside, surrounded by white walls and carpet, or concrete, if we're out living in the city potentially. And how much time did we used to spend with our bare feet on the earth, walking in the soil, trees around us, the scents of plants being inhaled by us? That is our natural habitat, and we don't connect with it anymore in the same way. Certainly not enough. If you are someone who lives in the city, I really encourage you to get yourself outdoors on the weekends where you can. Find your parks. Where are the nearest parks near you? Can you organize that you walk through a park on your way to work? How can you bring more nature into your life? Can you have a lunch break sitting out in the sun, in the grass? There are so many ways that we can reinforce this connection to nature, and something that I will certainly be exploring further with you is the power of nature and really fostering that connection. The next really important part of building your anxiety resilience is looking at how much are you allowing yourself to experience rest, to have fun, to take a break. You know, society tells us we need to be go, go, go. We need to be busy all the time. If you're not busy, it's almost like you're not worthy. You're not good enough if you're not busy. We've got this toxic culture, really, of displaying our busyness like a badge of honor. I'm so busy. I'm sorry. I've got no time to see you. Or if you want to catch up with me, you're going to have to book me in a month in advance. That's almost like a status symbol. And it's not cool. And I want to end that. I want to help encourage us to move beyond that, because we are worthy just as we are. Your value is not in your productivity. There is so much more to you than how much you are doing. Just by being, you are enough. And it takes a while sometimes for that to really sink in and feel true. But with enough practice, we really can start to change our thoughts and rewire our minds. And this is the other passion of mine and a key part of the anxiety reset method is having a better awareness of our thoughts and our beliefs. What are you telling yourself on a daily basis? You know, pretty much all of the thoughts we think in one day do not really vary that much to the next day. So we kind of stay stuck in these same thinking patterns. Perhaps when you wake up, one of your first thoughts is, oh, another day. Oh gosh, I've got so much I need to do. Oh, and there's that pressure from that thing and this thing. And then you go to the bathroom and you look in the mirror and you might splash your face with water and say something mean to yourself about your appearance and wish that you look different and criticize yourself. And the cycle goes on. You know, it's really hard to become aware that you're in one of those thinking ruts and make a change. It can be really challenging to do that. But what I want to empower you with is the understanding that we really can rewire our brains. We have this concept called neuroplasticity, meaning that the brain cells, those neurons, those neural pathways in our brain are changeable, malleable. They are plastic. And the pathways that you are using currently are just pathways that you have learnt to use and you keep using. And what you can do is you can actually learn new information, think new thoughts, and start to prune away at those old beliefs, old patterns of thinking over time, and build new neural pathways. In this way, you do change your brain. So when we stop using a neural connection, when we stop thinking that belief, that thought, we actually lose it eventually. Just like you can't remember that second language you learnt in high school, because you can't remember it if you're not using it. You will lose those neural pathways. And just as when you first start a new job, it's really challenging and difficult because you have to learn how to do things in a different way and there's a new system. Eventually, after a few months at that new job, you don't have to think so hard. You don't have to try so hard. And it starts to become easier. And it starts to become second nature. This is how you too can start to change your way of thinking. Can you imagine if you thought some different thoughts a lot of the time? Can you imagine if every day you woke up and you thought, wow, I'm excited for today. What wonderful moments await me today. I'm so grateful for all the wonderful things that I have in my life. I'm grateful just to be alive. Isn't it great to be alive? Imagine if you thought like that. Imagine how much more enjoyable life would be, even in the boring moments, even in the routine and the mundane. This is how we make a massive impact on your anxiety. And there are a lot of techniques to help you in this process. And I'll certainly be discussing a lot more about beliefs and mindset as we delve into the next few episodes in this first season. Now, I have touched on sleep and how important that is for building resilience, but it certainly is. And one of the most important things as well is trying to get a regular sleep pattern. Our body likes to operate on a rhythm. You might have heard of the circadian rhythm before. And our body likes things to be the same. So we often, with our modern way of living, kind of stuff this up a bit because we have late nights on weekends and we sleep in and we get up at different times during the weekdays. Maybe we travel internationally. Maybe we're jet lagged, crossing time zones. This is not great for our sleep quality. So something to watch out for and just be mindful of is trying to regulate that sleep pattern for yourself. See if you can set yourself a regular bedtime so that your body starts to get used to that bedtime and gets used to a certain wake time as well. This is a really, fundamental step for helping to build your anxiety resilience. When it comes to building your resilience to anxiety, certainly fostering connections with people is essential. And this can be a big challenge for a lot of you. I know, I work with you women. I know how difficult it can be when perhaps social anxiety might be a factor for you that has you constantly judging yourself, criticizing yourself in a social setting, thinking you shouldn't have said that. Maybe you just avoid social settings altogether. But something that I teach is how important it is to really allow yourself and give yourself permission with people that you trust to be vulnerable, to open up, to be seen, to tell someone the truth about how you're really feeling and not just always answering that question of how are you with I'm fine or I'm good. Maybe you say I'm great and inside you're really not great and you're really struggling. It is so important that we let people in, and you might feel like telling someone that you're going through a hard time is weakness or something to be ashamed of. But when you open up like that to someone else, and not just anyone, someone that you trust, you will always be met with empathy. You will always be considered brave and courageous for being vulnerable. The reason for this is that every single one of us, all humans, experience shame. We all know what that feels like. We all have things that we regret or mistakes we made, parts of ourselves we wish no one could see, things that we feel ashamed of. We all know shame. And when we see someone else express something that they may feel ashamed of, we can only see the bravery in that. And we empathize with it. It's so easy when you have that thing that you kind of want to share. You know you need to share with someone, but you feel so afraid of being judged. And you feel like you're the only one who knows what that feels like. I'm telling you, anxiety is an absolute epidemic across the globe. And it wouldn't be like that if other people didn't also have some of the similar feelings that you have, think a lot of the thoughts that you're thinking, and certainly have those things that they feel alone about, things they feel vulnerable about. But it's so important that we lead the way for other people to also feel like it's okay to be vulnerable. You might allow, if you share this thing that you need to share with a friend, you might be opening up a pathway there where then that person can share something they need to share too. So remember that. When you are vulnerable, you are brave, and you are being a leader. In our society, we need more people making it okay to be vulnerable, to be weak, to say, I'm struggling. And you can be part of that. Another really important aspect for building your anxiety resilience is actually moving your body, exercising. In fact, this is so important that exercise is actually, and we see this in research, in clinical research, that exercise is equal in effectiveness for managing anxiety to taking medication and going to psychotherapy. Now, I don't know about you, but that kind of blows my mind, because I think we should be talking much, much more about exercise for anxiety and really highlighting that. But at the moment, it seems that it's not the forefront of the conversation, but certainly it is for me, and I will be spreading that message loud and clear. Finally, the last aspect of building anxiety resilience is to consider the stimulants you are using. Are you throwing petrol on the fire of your anxiety? And certainly one of the most popular stimulants in the world is coffee, or caffeine specifically. So certainly with decaf coffee, you can avoid most of the caffeine, but be aware that there is still some caffeine in decaf. A lot of people don't realize that black tea actually contains caffeine as well, as does green tea. It's only those herbal teas, things like lavender, chamomile, peppermint, that are actually caffeine free. So consider, are you fueling your body with more of these stimulants and actually throwing fuel on the fire that you just do not need? I hope this has been really eye-opening for you as you sort of listen to these things I've discussed and ask yourself some really important questions. Going forward, we have so many wonderful experts lined up to discuss more about anxiety, more facets to uncover, more questions we can be asking ourselves, tools, practical tools that we can really use to empower ourselves with anxiety and help you discover for yourself that
anxiety does not have to rule you. You can find a way to manage your anxiety and get to a place where anxiety is a sensation that happens for you from time to time, but certainly not every day, and certainly not for long periods of time. There is a life for you beyond anxiety. There is a way for you to still follow your dreams and not let that fear hold you back. And it is my absolute pleasure to support you on that journey.
And there you have it, the very first episode of the Anxiety Reset podcast. Who needed that trip down memory lane? Let me know if there are specific parts of the episode that resonated with you. I love hearing your feedback and connecting with this beautiful community that we've built together here. Now, if you've listened to my recent episodes over the last few months, you'll know I've been hard working away on building and creating new content for you, new lessons and trainings to help support you in becoming an anxiety master. For the very first time, access is available for you to sign up and join the Anxiety Masters membership. This is where month by month, we're going to be meeting on live calls. I've got live group coaching, live workshops that I'll be running with themes every month. We're going to be covering things beyond just the Anxiety Reset program. We're going to go even deeper, delving into that space of mastery, that ongoing support, ongoing practice, repetition, reminders, a space to check in, a space to feel like you're understood. You know, this self-development journey can be a bit lonely sometimes when you've noticed the people around you are not on your level, they're not doing their inner work, and it can be so frustrating. This is the space where people get you, where we're gonna celebrate taking it slow, going for your big dreams that everyone around you might think you're crazy for pursuing. We're gonna celebrate the times where you take a break and you let yourself rest, celebrating moments where you enjoy life, really getting present and building a life that is meaningful, satisfying, and fulfilling to you. When we live in this way, our experience of anxiety is much less frequent, much less intense, because we're living in alignment with ourselves. We are bringing our life into balance on all levels, mind, body, and soul. That is what this space is for, and I'm just so excited to have something to offer where we can all keep in touch, keep working together. I'll be speaking with you, working with you on these live calls. We're going to have monthly breathwork classes too, breathwork healing meditation sessions led by our amazing New Zealand-based instructor, Mary. She is such a beautiful energy to be around. You'll feel healed just being in her presence. There's an exclusive new meditation library with fresh 10-minute meditations for you, and we're going to have special events and so much more. If you know in your heart you already want to join the Anxiety Masters membership, then jump into the link in the show notes. You'll be able to see everything about it there. This is a beautiful way to dip your toe into the water of this work, or continue moving forward on your healing journey if you've already worked with me in the past. Now, for those who want the intensive experience, you want to go through everything, you want to leave no stone unturned, 90 days of working with the Anxiety Reset method, then the program is for you. The Anxiety Reset program is also now available. You get 3 months access to Anxiety Masters, the membership, to have that live experience as well as you go through the program. The program is the space to dive deep, to really nut out the core root causes of your anxiety and get to the bottom of it. Each week we work with a component of your mindset, your physical body, your physical health. We work through gut health, nutrition, hormones. All of it is in the Anxiety Reset program. So if you're totally new to this work, you might like to start with the membership, dip your toe in the water, find out what I'm all about, work with me live, join those live workshops. But if you want the full experience and learn everything there is to know in one space, this is like doing your degree in becoming an anxiety master, then join the Anxiety Reset program. You'll have access to the master's membership too. And for those who've worked with me already, come join us in the membership. That is the space to continue our work, continue the support. Now I have a way to keep working with you, and I'm so excited to get started. All the information is in the show notes, and I'm excited to work with you if this feels like something you're being called to. The bottom line is, no matter what option you choose, you will become an anxiety master.
Thank you for listening. We have reached the end of this episode. If you enjoy this podcast and you find it helpful, I would really appreciate it if you would hit subscribe or share this episode on your Instagram stories, and make sure you tag @Georgie the Naturopath. But that is all for today. Please be kind to yourselves. Know that you are enough and you are exactly where you need to be.